Welcome, everybody. Thank you for joining us this evening for the second community meeting for Clifford Park. We are going to jump in and we can catch folks up if they join us a little bit later. Wanted to, again, thank you guys for joining us tonight. I know we have a lot of meetings on Clifford, and this is a repeat of the meeting that we had in person on Saturday. We wanted to make sure on this project that we were really able to reach a lot of different community members, and we know not everybody is comfortable in person and not everyone has access for online meetings. So we wanted to be able to do both of those. So in case you were also able to join us on Saturday, this presentation is a repeat of what we had done then because we wanted to share the same information so that we could get feedback from everybody. We did have a couple of little comments throughout the presentation that we wanted to clarify a few things in the presentation. So we did update one or two little items, and as we go through the presentation, we'll let you guys know what we updated. So wanted to let everybody know that, actually, before we do this, I'm going to make sure everybody knows tonight that we have Spanish, Cape Verdean Creole, and Haitian Creole interpretation. And what I'd like to do is turn it over to our interpreters so that they could each introduce themselves and let everybody know how they can join an interpretation channel if they need to. I'd love to start with Spanish if we could.
Good evening. My name is Claudio Ruiz. I'm the Spanish interpreter. To be able to access interpretation, once the interpretation begins, you will see a globe icon at the bottom of the Zoom screen. You will click on that and you can choose the channel of your choice. If you're on a tablet or on a cell phone, you can find that on the three dots on the top left corner of your screen. Buenas noches, estamos por comenzar la interpretación. Cuando esta comience, usted va a ver el globito del mundo debajo de la pantalla de Zoom. Le va a hacer clic ahí y escoger español. Si está en una tableta o en un celular, usted va a los tres puntos en la parte izquierda de arriba de la pantalla y asegúrese de hacerle done o hecho para que comience el servicio. Gracias. Thank you.
Thank you, Claudio. Could we turn it over to Cape Verdean Creole next, please?
Good evening. My name is Melissa Lopes. I'll be the Cape Verdean interpreter for tonight's meeting. We would like to let you know that we have interpretation services in Cape Verdean Creole, Spanish, and Haitian Creole tonight. If you like to use the service in Cape Verdean Creole language, you can touch the globe on the left corner and touch Cape Verdean Creole and press on that to be done. And I'll say it in Cape Verdean. Alô, boa noite. Meu nome é Melissa, sabem ser intérprete de língua cabo-verdiana hoje. Por favor, se você está interessado no encontro de hoje na língua cabo-verdiana, por favor, bota calca naquele globo que está ficando no lado esquerdo do telão e bota calca, se em caso você está num tablet ou no telefone, talvez você tenha que calca naqueles três pontinhos que está ficando no canto, tá calca língua cabo-verdiana e pronto. Obrigada, tenha bom resto de noite.
Thank you, Melissa. And then could we also have our Haitian Creole interpreter also share that information with us?
Certainly. Yes, my name is Caroline Floria. I am the Haitian interpreter. We'll be able to help you to connect. You just have to, if you have phone or if you have your tablet or you're doing it on with regular laptop, you just have these three buttons or three dots. You click on the three dots, then you'll see the globe. Through the globe, then you'll be able to select the Haitian Creole. From there, you'll be able to connect with us. Right now, I'm going to translate it in Haitian Creole. Bonsoir tout le monde. Moi, c'est Caroline. Moi, capable d'aider pour interprétation en haïtien, créole haïtien. Ça, vous avez pour faire, si vous connectez ensemble avec nous, vous avez trois boutons. Vous avez seulement peser sur trois boutons et puis un globe qui apparaît et là-dedans, vous avez sélectionner qui est là-dedans. Est-ce que c'est créole haïtien? Et comme ça, vous avez connecter ensemble avec. Merci beaucoup, mais espérez tout bagaille très bien. Thank you.
Thank you, Carlene. I appreciate that. At this point, we're going to go ahead and start that interpretation, and we'll give it a few minutes for everybody to be able to join whichever language they're interested in joining. So that should be available for everyone at the bottom of your screen now. All right, thank you, everyone. Hopefully everyone has been able to get into the language channel that they're interested in for this evening. Wanted to let everybody know that tonight's meeting is being recorded. So it will be available in about a week on our project website, which we will put in the chat for you guys in a little bit. So if you guys have any friends or neighbors who were unable to join us this evening or on Saturday for our in-person meeting, they'd be able to view this presentation when they have a moment as well. Next slide, please. We want to make sure that this conversation feels accessible to everybody. So we want to make sure that people feel very comfortable sharing with us. We want people to be able to share their opinions, and we want to be very respectful to make sure that we give everyone an opportunity to speak. So if you've already asked a question or made a comment, if we could make sure that we give others a chance before we ask multiple questions, that would be great. And also, if you feel like talking in this meeting is not necessarily how you'd like to share those opinions, you can always set up a time with me or send me an email, and I'll also put my email address in the chat as well. There's some Zoom tips. I know we've probably all been used to using Zoom at this point, but just in case throughout the presentation, there are going to be some times that we would love to get feedback from you guys. So if you'd like to raise your hand and be able to share that with us, at the bottom of the screen, under your 3 dots that I know we were talking about earlier, there are reactions, and under that you can raise your hand. There's also the chat function as well. And so if you have any thoughts or questions during the presentation, you can also drop those in the chat too. We'll try to answer some as we go, but if we don't get those answered, we can do that during our discussion time as well. So tonight we're going to do an introduction of our Boston team and also of our design team. We're going to do a project overview just so everybody knows where we are in the project. We have some design concepts that we want to share with you to get your feedback. And obviously the listening is really why we're here tonight. You guys know and love this park so much. So we really care about what you guys have to say and what your thoughts are on these design ideas. So like I said earlier, my name is Lauren Bryant. I'm the project manager for Boston Parks for this project. Kathy Baker Eclipse, who is our director of the capital plan, is also on the call this evening. And I know we've said this a lot, but I do really want to reiterate that Boston Parks is not doing this project in a bubble. We know that there are a lot of challenges that come with Clifford Park that have happened for decades, and we know that this is not going to be something Boston Parks can solve on our own. So we have a really big team at the city from many different departments, several of which are listed here, that we want to just make sure everybody knows that we're doing a lot of collaboration because we really want to do this project and work as a collaborative team throughout the city. Next slide, please. Our design team is BSC Group. They're a design firm that's done several parks with Boston Parks over the years. And we've got a good team with us, and several of those design team members are here tonight. And I know that you're going to hear from Ricardo Ostrich and also Katie Kemen tonight. And so we want to make sure that you guys know who this team is. They're going to be with us throughout this project. And I'll let them also introduce themselves as it comes to their points in the presentation. So the project schedule, when we first had our listening session back in August, which was, before we even started talking about the design, we really wanted to hear from the community. And one of the things we wanted the community to help us with was what this process looked like and what would feel good to the community. So this schedule really came out of a lot of conversations that we had with the community back in August. And one of the things that we heard was that the community really wanted a very detailed and very intensive community process in terms of really listening to the community, but they were hoping to do it on a shortened time frame. Because of all the challenges that surround Clifford, people really wanted the construction to get underway sooner so that we could start to see some of these great changes that we're talking about. So that's where we came up with the schedule that you'll see here. We had our first community meeting talking about design related items in October. We heard a lot of really great feedback desires that people wanted in the park, things people felt like worked well, but also things people thought could be changed to make the park even better. And then we have our second set of community meetings now. And like I said earlier, we're doing all of these meetings, both in Zoom and in person, so that we can reach a broader audience. We had that second community meeting in person this past Saturday, had some really good feedback from everybody. And then we're having our Zoom meeting tonight. And at these second community meetings, what we're doing is we're showing several design concepts that we put together based on all the feedback that we heard at those first two meetings. And then what we'll do from here is we'll take the feedback that we got on Saturday and today, and then a survey that you'll hear a little bit more about later tonight. And that's going to help us make a final concept of what we think this park could be. And then in January, we're going to come back for a series of in-person and Zoom meeting again, where we present that concept and we listen to you guys and see if we got it right. Did we present something to you that is really going to meet the needs and the desires and the hopes of what you would like to see in this park? And then after that, we're going to be putting together construction documents that we will put out to bid, and the hope is to go into construction summer or fall of 2024. So that's a bit of a schedule of kind of where we've been and where we think we're going to go. So again, if you have any questions on that, you can put that in the chat, or we can talk about it a little bit later as well. We get asked often, how do design decisions get made? And I know those of you who've been with us have seen this diagram several times, but it is important just to share that there's a lot that goes into the design process and those decision-making things that happen. And we have City of Boston priorities. These can be related to climate resiliency, access to parks. We have Boston Parks goals that we have in terms of creating access to parks, making sure that, you know, we have parks within walkable distance to our residents. We also have things like safety and regulatory guidelines, things like ADA, Conservation Commission, because Clifford is in the floodplain. And so that actually does play in here as well in terms of that regulatory aspect of it. And then obviously the community input. That's why we're here. You guys know this park, you love this park, you have really big desires for this park. So we really want to hear from you, and all of that goes into how we make decisions. And then we also wanted to reiterate, we have heard so many things, and this is just a quick snapshot. This is by no means every single thing that we've heard in our past meetings, but these seemed to be some of the loudest ideas and some of the ideas that we really wanted to make sure that we incorporate into our concepts moving forward. And for those who were here Saturday, we did add a couple of items, which were the crosswalks and the yellow lights that we heard a lot about, and call boxes. So that was something that we definitely have heard. In terms of the fields, we heard that, you know, expanding the use of what's there, creating multi-use fields, creating fields that allowed for multiple sports to be played and multiple activities to happen at the same time within the park is really important. That softball fields are really well used. And we also heard in terms of baseball that it's really hard when you've got kids that are trying to move from a little league field to a big field, and there's nothing really intermediate for them. So keeping kids there with having that intermediate field is important. We talked a lot about field surfacing. And we've heard that there are folks that really enjoy and appreciate and desire natural turf in terms of having grass that kids can play on. We also have heard the understanding of having multiple sports being played at one time, how we know that multiple sports could be accommodated differently on artificial turf. And so one of the things that we heard was the combination of natural and artificial turf could work well. So we have concepts that show multiple of these different ideas. Courts, we heard that expansion of courts would be really important. We heard that, you know, going from one tennis and one basketball to two tennis and two basketball would really be helpful. Tenacity could use it. The Mason School would love to have basketball closer to their building for their students to use. And also in terms of the courts that are closer to the Mason, having painted games such as Foursquare and hopscotch and other things that the students could use would be really appreciated for them. People wanted the playground expanded, and there was a lot of talk about accessible playground use and making sure that we had play equipment for children of all abilities. We also talked about adding, splash pad and water play. And we talked about how, as much as everybody wants that, it's good to have that a little separated from the playground itself, because, teachers might not want kids being wet before they go back into school, or sometimes parents, when they're there with their families, want to kind of keep the wet time separate from the rest of playground. We heard about wanting to increase, water fountains close to each activity space, more benches, eating and picnic areas, especially in the summer, where families pick up meals from the Mason pool, and having a place that they can eat those in the park. Updated lighting for evening events, and designated spaces for team storage and for portable restrooms. So those are all things that we heard that we took into account as we were putting together the concepts that the design team are going to share with you guys tonight. And I think with that, I'm going to stop talking and I'm going to turn it over to Ricardo.
Thank you, Lauren. My name is Ricardo Austrich. I'm the Director of Landscape Architecture at BSC Group, and I am project manager for this project and co-project manager with my colleague, Katie Kim, and just a terrific team along with the city of Boston. So one of the things we embarked on when we first started working on this project is we wanted to understand the other parks that people know and love in the community. And so we embarked on this sort of park comparison project. And so we looked at the different parks, and what you see in the outline in yellow is the outline of like what the Clifford Park footprint is. And then we looked at just a few, and Malcolm X Park was one of the first ones that came to mind. And this park really kind of sort of struck us because it was adjacent to a pretty active community center. It included mature woodlands. There was a natural multi-use field, so that was important to note. Soccer, football, and an adult fitness area. It had multiple kind of contiguous basketball and tennis courts, which we thought was also a very good, interesting observation, and they were very adjacent to the community. And then what was really lovely is they had a very large play area that was really over kind of quite a bit of terrain, and there was a splash pad. There are other elements of this park that are something to consider, and we will talk about them at the end of the presentation when it comes time to discuss the different seating arrangements that we want people to consider. The next slide, please. Another terrific park was Garvey Park in Dorchester. And this one was great because it was next to a skating rink. It was a synthetic multi-use field. It had baseball, lacrosse. There was beautiful integrated seating along the sloped areas. There was a basketball and street hockey court there. There was a very nice walking loop. There was a large play area, a splash pad, a dog park. It also had really kind of lovely discrete rain gardens. And so in terms of sustainability, that's something we looked at. And so I think this was quite an inspiration to us and the design team in terms of when we start thinking about Clifford Park. Next slide, please. And then the last park that we looked at was Billings Field in West Roxbury. And I think this one was intriguing because I really wanted to look at not only just a natural multi-use field with softball and baseball fields, but also that there were quite a few contiguous basketball and tennis courts along the edge of the park at the foot of a wooded slope. And so we kind of looked at that and said, wow, that's an interesting model that we really need to think about here, because you'll see when Katie starts talking about the options, you know, the playing fields will occur in different places throughout the park. And so trying to kind of fix where these things occur is going to be an important design consideration. There's a play area as well, and there's a walking loop. So that's the three park comparisons that we can discuss later or come to again as we review the different options. Next slide, please. So another very important thing is really kind of understanding the vision and goal for this park. And so I think the vision that we have understood from meetings with you is that we want an inclusive park, we want a resilient park, and we want a park that's really highly utilized. We want a park that reflects the needs of all the park users and the community, and just having something that really is just active for most of the day and much of the night. And we think that that is a real goal, an important goal to have with this park. So that's something that's going to be very important in terms of how we design the different elements that you'll see later on tonight. And the goals are to improve the openness and visibility of the park. We want this park to be welcoming, but also to feel safe and accessible. Oh, if you can go back, I didn't quite. Thank you. Increase the utilization of the park and activities within the park. Also, we mentioned resilience and rain gardens, and so potentially because of the flooding issues and some of the issues already present in the park, really increase the resilience of the park and really have this park be kind of a contributor to the vibrancy of this neighborhood in Boston. So in terms of the renovation and the goals, you see here at kind of a park that's pretty open and really welcomes kids playing soccer. A park that can be used at different times of the day. So, you know, improving all the lighting so that it feels comfortable, not only in the fields, but in the other areas of the park. So you see that at the top right-hand side and at the bottom left-hand side, so that all the areas feel safe and lit at all times of the day. And finally, a park that has some green space and is really a green lung for this community. Next slide. In terms of the utilization, here you see a multi-use turf field, and so that field is something that's going to be very important. In several of the schemes we discussed the different types of turf that can be used and what the implications are. On the right-hand side, you see sort of soccer playing at night, and so this is something that we really want to kind of highlight, that we want this park to be used by the community at night and to feel comfortable there. And finally, the playground. And the playground is a really integral feature that I think really will speak to the needs of the community that are there and really want to use this park at different times of the day and really bring their families here. Next slide. We talk about resilience, and so issues related to stormwater and rain, and trying to incorporate sort of the resilience features in ways that make it sort of a really kind of feel like a green oasis. It can be a teaching tool, but it's sort of really friendly and welcoming. So that's our key goal with using some of the resilience features that we can incorporate to this park as we try to combat issues related to heat island effect and climate change. Next slide. The vibrancy of the neighborhood is really important. So kind of, you know, movie nights, using colorful street furniture or furniture that really kind of highlights the kind of the really varied communities that use this park and really bring some color and life to the space, and a place that is welcoming on the left-hand side for people to come and picnic and to use it during different times of the day and to really feel welcomed here and safe. The next slide. And so with that, I'm going to turn it over to my colleague, Katie Kemen, who's going to discuss the 3 different concepts. But I think we want to stop here for a minute, Lauren. And do we want to see if anybody has any questions or comments? Because we don't really want to just be talking to you all night. So if anybody has any comments or questions, this might be a good stopping point before we unveil the 3 different options.
That sounds great. Thanks, Ricardo. And yes, absolutely. If anyone has any thoughts on this, anything they feel like we've missed, or any important ideals that we should be looking at as part of our design concepts, this would be a great time to jump in, whether you'd like to put something in the chat or raise your hand. We're happy to call on folks as well. Maybe that means that we have hit everything that everyone wants us to talk about, Ricardo.
I don't think so, but let's just keep going and we'll see it. And hopefully things will happen during the evening. Thank you.
And if anybody has any thoughts, feel free to stick them in the chat or raise your hand and we can get back to you on that too.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Lauren and Ricardo, and thanks everybody. So as Ricardo alluded to, we have 3 concepts we want to share with you. And the way we're going to go through this is we're going to present all 3 concepts. So before we jump into discussion, everybody has an idea of the range of concepts that have been prepared so far. And then we'll go back and we'll talk about each one individually, so that, we can kind of dive into each concept and say, what works, what do we like, what do we don't like. And one thing we want to also make clear is that we're not asking you to pick concept 1, concept 2, or concept 3. We really want to know in each one what works, what doesn't. It's very likely that the final concept that we come back with in January is going to have, elements of different concepts and maybe something that doesn't appear here. So we really just want these to be exercises where what we're presenting tonight allows you to, react, respond, and share your input. So without further ado, we'll move forward. So we did share the more detailed list of what we heard. There were a few elements within that we really kept in mind as we started every concept and really tried to hit these. And part of that is because they are kind of bigger, more immovable things that the other elements can fit within and work around. And so just, thinking about what we were trying to do as we were kind of balancing what could fit where and how, which elements would we bring in and how would they be arranged. We really wanted to try to support the use of 2 field sports and 2 court sports at the same time. We didn't want one activity to prevent other activities from happening. We know there's a lot of interest and a lot of activity in the park. There's a lot of different groups who want to be able to use it, whether, nearby residents, sports teams, schools. And so we want a park that allows lots of users at the same time. We also tried to expand the existing field sports as much as possible, and kind of that kind of plays into the item above. We want to maintain existing trees. This is important for the city of Boston. This is important for heat in the area. It's important for stormwater. And so, we are trying to arrange things with recognition of existing trees and preserving those. And then we really want to maximize the children's play areas because we know that the Mason School is right across the street. There's a lot of kids out there at recess. There's a lot of kids in the neighborhood. And, we want to make sure that they have a great place to play and there's space to accommodate all of them.
And Katie, if I could just jump in there really quickly, the one thing that I didn't say earlier is we have been doing a lot of coordination with a lot of the organizations directly around the park. And one of the things, we actually had a really great meeting yesterday with the Mason School about how we're going to get the kids involved. And it was really exciting. And so we're going to be able to go in and not only get their feedback about different types of play equipment and colors and themes, but we're actually going to be able to teach them about park design and talk to them about how some of these decisions are made. So it's pretty exciting that we can kind of teach about landscape architecture and some of those items as we go. And we've also been able to get in touch with Roxbury Prep as well. And what we're hoping to do is over the next week or so, have a meeting with them to talk about some of their needs in the park too. So when Katie's talking about, making sure that we figure out what, those direct abutters are, needing and using in the park, that those conversations are starting, and we're really excited about the collaboration we're going to have with them.
Thanks, Lauren. All right, so this is the first concept that is prepared, and I'll just kind of walk through the different elements, and they're here as well if you want to read them. So this concept includes a multi-use field that has soccer and football. The soccer is the blue lines that you see, football is the white lines. It has a baseball field with a 310 foot outfield, which is Babe Ruth senior size field. And then it also has a softball field. And this is one of the areas where we've made a slight change from the prior in-person meeting that happened this weekend. Just noting that the softball field can also accommodate that intermediate level field that Lauren was talking about a little bit earlier with some adjustments to the infield. And so we want to reflect the versatility of the fields here. On this concept, you could be playing softball and either soccer or football at the same time. So that's where we would get in the two field sports. And then you can see over by the, in this bottom right-hand corner, you see we have some courts, and we're going to show you in a second, different court options and different arrangements that can happen within there. There is an increased playground area over here, and then a nearby splash pad, although separate. There is a dog park area in the bottom right corner as well, and that's a consistent feature in all three concepts. People were pretty consistent in earlier meetings that that's really the best. They want a dog park, and that's really the best spot for it. So that kind of holds true in all of our concepts. Some of the potential drawbacks that we saw with this is that the courts are further from the Mason School, and we know there was some interest expressed in being able to use the courts during recess. And so that's a potential drawback here. And this concept also doesn't increase the number of courts at the site, it just holds them the same. With this arrangement and the fields, we could do natural turf, we could do artificial turf, or we could do some sort of combination. So this is a somewhat flexible concept in terms of surfacing. Here are some of the different court options, and we'll be interested to come back to this once we start discussing. But like I said, in that space that is designated for courts, there's lots of different options. So we could dedicate it to tennis, we could dedicate it entirely to basketball, we could split it up, tennis and basketball, we could have full court, half court. So lots of different options within that designated space. And so we'd be interested to hear, what are the primary needs and what would suit this community the best. All right, this is concept 2. This concept really kind of fits in the most amenities of the options that are available. So similar to the last concept, there's a multi-use field. You can see football with the white lines here, and it's a little bit more difficult to see here, but we have a soccer field running perpendicular here. It has 2 softball or little league fields. So you can see those there. Because of the overlap of the fields here with, infields intersecting with football and soccer, etc., this concept would require artificial turf in the fields. We could still have natural grass in some of the surrounding areas of the park, but the actual athletic fields would have to be synthetic turf. This does increase the number of courts, and similarly, we have some options with courts here, but they are adjacent to the playground, so they're a little bit more accessible. They're also over on the side of the park where more of the residential area is, versus the fields being kind of over on the park where Mass Ave and kind of more commercial or business uses are. All the concepts have a walking loop with exercise equipment that would be distributed throughout, and this similarly has a dog park. Potential drawbacks in this are less flexibility with the field surfacing, as I was mentioning, and the fields overlapping. So, you could be playing softball over here and soccer over here. You could be playing, using both softball fields at the same time if you wanted to. But if football were playing here, then that would, the other sports wouldn't be able to use the full size of the fields designated for them.
And Katie, if I could just jump in, one of the other pros that we heard at the community meeting on Saturday was that this concept pulls those courts closer to the Mason School, which was a huge request that we heard from the community in the school. And it also creates that multi-use field, which we can assume that would probably be really helpful for Roxbury Prep as well, and pulls those closer to the school edges. And so that's one of the other pros of this concept too.
So within concept 2, here are some additional court options. So, we had heard a suggestion that perhaps, in the image that I showed here, the tennis courts are up next to the playground, but we could put the basketball courts up here. There's even additional options of, we have it here with 1 full court and 2 half courts, but we could have 2 full courts. We could move the tennis courts further down here because we had heard from the Mason School that perhaps basketball courts might be more used during recess than tennis. We can change the orientation of the courts up here. So again, lots of options within this designated court space. And then the third concept really kind of separates out some of the activities. So it would allow for this multi-use field you see with the football and soccer to kind of operate independently without any sort of overlap from a baseball field. But obviously, you know, there's just one baseball field, where currently the park has multiple fields for softball, baseball use. Because of this, because they're separated and we don't have so much overlap, this, similar to concept one, we could have natural grass, we could have synthetic turf, you know, in one area or another combination. And then, you know, consistent with the others, you know, we have the playground, splash pad, dog park, and walking loop. But the courts are also over kind of further away from the Mason School, like there was in concept one. This has a little bit of a smaller dog park area, and it also has a little bit more unprogrammed space. You can see there's kind of, you know, spaces in here and over at the bottom, a little bit of area over here where, you know, it's not sort of dedicated space. And so, you know, we know people want this park, you know, sort of every inch of this park to be used and well used. And so, you know, we would be interested in hearing how we would fill those and what, you know, amenities and uses we could add to those areas as well. Let me just, if we want to, we went through the exercise of, you know, kind of moving the different fields around. So if folks want to talk through that as we get into the conversation, we have those here. But I'll just summarize the different concepts here, and it, you know, kind of walks us through concept one, concept two, and concept three, and how they all compare. So for baseball or softball fields, concept one has two fields, concept two has three, and concept three has one. And so I won't read through the whole chart, but, you know, I'll just give everybody sort of a minute to sit and think about, look at what the different features are, and just kind of consider that for a second. The dog parks are relatively consistent in their size. Again, concept two is the one that, you know, absolutely would require some artificial turf. The others could go either way. Concept two has the largest playgrounds of all of the concepts, and also has the most fields and courts. All right, so let's go back and let's open up the discussion. We'll go back to concept number one. And again, if you want to either put comments in the chat, or if you want to raise your hand, I think we have to unmute folks. Is that correct, Lauren? Yeah, so we have to unmute you. So either if you want to make a note in the chat, or use the hand raising feature, and we'll look forward to hearing your comments. But we'd really love to know, what if folks, maybe we can kind of break it down. What do folks think about the fields and the courts? What works, what doesn't? Any other thoughts?
And again, just want to reiterate what Katie said earlier, that this is not necessarily a choose one, two, or three. There are so many different ideas in each of these. So when we come back in January, it's very likely going to be a combination of multiple elements of each of these. So being able to understand what you guys like about each of these concepts is really going to help us in decision making as we go forward. And I see that, John, you've got your hand raised. Are you able to unmute?
Yep.
Perfect. Thank you. Welcome.
Yeah. Hi. Thank you for inviting us. John Burley at Roxbury Prep. Very excited to see these designs and to see the opening date, which, so our school is going to be on the corner of Proctor Street, right by the playground there. Really excited to join the community. And our opening date was the same as the renovation date for the park. So very excited about that. On with me is Dwayne Robinson, our athletic director. So it's great to see these designs. The quick question I had was, you had mentioned in concept two, Katie, that the design requires artificial turf. Why is that different from the other designs? And could you explain that a little bit?
Katie, do you want to take that one, or do you want me to jump in?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. So if you can see where the football lines line up over the infield of the baseball, because with a skinned infield, there's a tripping hazard between where the clay ends and the grass begins. And so from a safety perspective, there's a tripping hazard with overlapping any kind of football or soccer over the infield of any kind of a diamond infield.
And thank you for we'd love to do an individual meeting as well when you have
Absolutely.
time. We can talk a little bit more about that. From our perspective, our kids are definitely more interested in basketball than tennis, just as a note for reference. But really excited about the plans. The other question I had was, and maybe you've addressed this in other meetings that I have missed, but in terms of safety for the park, I heard you talk about additional lighting. Is there increased plans for increased maintenance? Does that come with the budget? Can you talk a little bit about some of the safety measures that are going to be put in place with these designs?
Yeah, Kathy, I know you're on. I don't know if you wanted to jump in on any of that. If you have a minute, if not, I can also jump in. Kathy may not be able to. Oh, there you go.
I'm just pulling into my driveway. So forgive me for the beeping. But so the maintenance is we maintain all of our parks with our own park staff. So there's already a maintenance crew that does maintain Clifford Park. We expect that most of our park renovations are a net neutral or maybe a slight increase to operations, but there's no major additional maintenance operations costs that are associated specifically with Clifford. But over the years, we have been responding to community requests to do more frequent trash pickups, to monitor the site more frequently, and some of our city partners are also helping us with that. With some of the police presence and the sweeps, the needle sweeps that do go on. So there has been an increase in maintenance, but there's not a dedicated line item for increasing maintenance specifically for Clifford as a result of this capital renovation.
And in addition, Newmarket is also helping with some of that maintenance as well, if I'm right, Kathy, is that correct?
Yes, that is correct as well. They're also the Newmarket bid is also an important partner in the overall beautification of this side of the neighborhood as well.
And then in terms of the question about safety and some other items, so we're also working with Boston Police and working in terms of looking at call boxes, security cameras, lighting, a lot of those aspects as well. So a lot of that will be incorporated into our final designs as well.
And just sorry, one last follow-up there, if I may. Any fencing planned, or I know there's some existing fencing around the park. Is that part of the plan? Is that increasing, decreasing?
That's a great question. And actually somebody had sent a question to me in the chat about that too. So it's great that it's coming up so we can let everybody know. So yeah, fencing is absolutely something that we'll be looking at as part of this project. As most of you guys know, there's fencing around the park now, but there's not necessarily gates at each of the entrances. So as we continue to design and once we figure out, where each of these elements within the park goes, we'll be looking at what the appropriate adjacent fencing is for each of those activities surrounding the park. So once our concept is finalized, we'll be able to look deeper at that fencing question, and we can address that more at that third meeting in January when we're looking at the concepts, and we can talk about the fencing associated with each of the areas around the park at that point. But absolutely, fencing is something we're going to be looking at for sure.
Thank you very much.
Absolutely. Sarah, your hand is raised. Are you able to unmute?
Yes, hi.
Hi, Sarah, welcome.
Hi, everyone. I'm sitting in my car now, not driving, so no safety issue. I wanted to follow up on the artificial turf versus natural. And full disclosure, I live in JP, so this is not my daily park use, but I am following it with interest. I thought the mayor had a policy that to avoid new turf And I understood you gave a reason, but I think if there are options that don't require it, the environmental impacts, the heat island, the increased injury, I don't want to preach. I can send info if you don't have it. There are a lot of drawbacks to the artificial, so I would put in a plea to try to avoid that if possible.
Thank you, Sarah. Kathy, are you able to comment on the mayoral artificial turf stance?
Yeah, the mayor has a preference for natural turf wherever possible, but she has been she does acknowledge that there are needs in an urban park setting that artificial turf can provide additional hours of play and additional flexibility that natural turf can't. So, and it does have, you know, I think the piece that we're also not is kind of a given for us as we think about the artificial turf is the amount of below grade stormwater storage that an artificial turf field can accommodate. Just, you know, that entire footprint can be stormwater storage, which is a huge benefit to the stormwater system as a whole. So the mayor's really trying to listen to the park users and the park the sports leagues especially, and trying to really carefully listen to where the need is greatest, and prioritizing those.
And I also, just to reiterate what Kathy was saying in terms of that water storage under the field, one of the things here is that, you know, I mentioned earlier in terms of Conservation Commission, we do have, you know, the park is in a floodplain, and there's a portion of this park in future projections that is going to continue to flood more and more. And so the drainage associated with it, regardless of what the design is of the park, is something that we're looking at. So that flood storage capacity is crucial in this park as well.
Thank you.
Thanks, Sarah. Any other thoughts on concept 2 before we jump over to concept 3 to get some feedback as well? Oh, the other thing I want to say about 2 as well, one of the things we heard on Saturday was the question of whether the soccer, which is currently perpendicular to the football, could also be oriented the same direction as the football. And then that way we could do a combination football soccer goal. And so that's something that absolutely could happen. So that's something here that we could also do in concept 2.
I don't know if so we heard from John about the basketball courts being of more interest. I don't know if anybody here has any other thoughts on basketball or tennis courts. I'll give just a second. I can share what we heard on Saturday, but I want to allow this group to also speak.
That would be great. And while we're talking about the courts, one of the other things that I'd love to hear too, we had some conversations about whether 2 full basketball courts would be better, whether 1 full basketball court and 2 half courts is better. So if anyone has any thoughts about that as well when we're looking at the courts, that would be good to know.
So I'll share what we heard on Saturday, which was that folks did prefer the basketball courts to be up near the playground because that seemed to be what the Mason School students would be using the most. It sounded like, you know, a couple people were like the idea of separate half courts, so people had some space, but overall, you know, a full court is also 2 half courts. And so to allow greater flexibility to have 2 full basketball courts close to the playground seemed to be the preferred option. And, you know, another added benefit is that this corner, this bottom corner where the tennis courts in this view are located, is also closer to houses, and tennis is a little bit of a quieter sport than basketball. So, you know, they saw that as a potential added benefit. we'll go over to concept 3, but please feel free, we can kind of jump back and forth in any of these. But are there any comments on concept 3? One thing that we noticed, here is that some of this space here could sort of be kind of a natural entryway from the new Roxbury Prep School. And so, it's the only one that has that kind of entrance place and could be kind of a nice, kind of visual feature. And then, also the separation of the two fields, and not having overlap allows again for that natural turf if that was preferred. But again, the courts are on the other side and things like that. So comments here.
Hi, this is John again. I really like the look of concept 3. It gives the most space for these both courts, but it seems to have less options for numerous sports at the same time. So while aesthetically, I think this is the nicest, option 2 seems to have the most utility.
Yeah. Lauren, if you can go back, Katie, if you go back to concept 2 for a moment. Yeah, I think concept 2 does actually offer an opportunity to also create, John, this is Ricardo, a moment or an opportunity to create a plaza space for the Roxbury Prep. If you look at those 4 trees and that, so there is that, and I think that we generally heard a more favorable kind of feeling for concept 2 on Saturday. So I'm glad to hear that you felt the same way.
And Domingos, it looks like you've got your hand raised. Are you able to unmute?
Hi guys, can you hear me?
Yes,
Yeah.
we can. Welcome.
All right, thanks for hosting this virtual meeting. Yeah, that's pretty much what Ricardo just said. The concept 2 was where we, the community, was leaning towards. You still be able to have multiple things going on, and at the same time, the community will benefit greatly from the way that it will lay out, especially the students at the Mason School. They'll be able to include those activities into their daily schedules for those students. We've never been able to have multiple sports going on at the same time, unless it was basketball or baseball simultaneously, or football and basketball. We've never been able to use the field for football and baseball at the same time, because you just can't. So concept 2 is where we're leaning towards as a community, because it fits what we've been asking for the last 30 years. Something that's going to cater to the community versus folks who are coming from the outside in. We're not looking to entertain, like I said on Saturday, the adults can drive to another park. This should be a family-orientated park. It should be geared towards the families in the community. We've suffered enough at the hands of others, and now it's the time where we can actually benefit and use something that's one of the only open spaces in the area. The nearest park that has a baseball diamond is the Jim Rice Field, and that's on the other side of Mass and Cavs. So again, I'm glad that we're coming together and we're speaking on this, and I just hope that we can come to a consensus on how we want to move forward.
Thank you, Domingos. I appreciate that. Any other thoughts on concept 3 while we're here?
We go on to a couple of the other.
Yeah.
Yeah, that sounds great.
Okay. So, oops, sorry about that. So Lauren mentioned that, there was a meeting with the Mason School yesterday, and we have some upcoming plans to reach out directly to, to be working directly with the students and hear from them and help them set, design the playground that, they're going to be using all the time. We have a survey that is going to be going to them, and these are some of the questions that they're going to be asked, thinking about what are the play features that they most want included in the playground, what are some of the themes, and some of the themes that we've offered as initial suggestions are sort of an art-oriented theme of, plate frames and places for them to draw and paintbrushes and, kind of that aesthetic, an under the sea playground with marine life and ocean plants, and also a beehive theme with bees and flowers. Although we're sure that they're going to come up with some other amazing ideas and we might end up with something totally different, but just some things to spark their imagination first.
And speaking of kids, we did have a couple of kids at the in-person meeting on Saturday, and it was really great to hear some of their ideas. And like Katie said, they come up with ideas that, we weren't even really thinking through. And we had some really great ideas, everything from, birdhouses and places that kids could do crafts in the summer, kid-friendly and pollinator-friendly plants, and all sorts of wonderful ideas that the kids were coming up with on Saturday. So we're really excited to hear all the other ideas that come from the Mason School too.
Thanks. We also want to be asking the students, but we're also interested if there's anybody here on the phone that has thoughts or opinions. We did hear from some of the teachers on, what might work for them the most. But whether the playground features sort of one large integrated structure, or whether it's like in the bottom picture that we see here, it's lots of small elements that offer different activities for the students. So, we'll pause again in a second, and if folks have any thoughts on that, we'd love to hear it. Another piece that, as we move to our preferred design that we'll come back to you with in January, we also are interested to know your thoughts on seating arrangements. So there's different ways or combinations of ways this can be addressed. In certain parks, seating might all be grouped together in a certain part of the park in a plaza, kind of like we see in this bottom right-hand picture that's labeled B. So lots of chairs creates a gathering place for lots of people to be next to each other. Sometimes in parks, there might just be a table kind of in a certain area, just one off, that offers seating in different areas of the park. And so, kind of wherever people are, they have different options. And so we don't know if there's a preference or a need, any thoughts on seating and how we allocate seating in the park. Whether folks really want sort of a large area with space and seating, maybe accommodate events or gatherings more, or whether it's dispersed throughout.
And feel free to let us know if you want to chat, or let us know if you want to raise your hand. But we're happy to hear this. And again, it could be a combination of each of these too, but if there was a preference amongst the community, it's something we're interested in hearing.
And I think in January, I want to add that we're going to look at not just this type, whether there's clustered seating in groups or individuals, but also kinds of types of seatings. And so that's going to be something that we want to sort of really kind of work with the community in January, once we have the kind of the preferred concept, and really look more than at the kind of fun details of the project.
Absolutely. And, one of the other things that we heard on Saturday in regards to seating was the thoughts that regardless of which type of grouping of seating that we have, could we have tables that have game tables on them, spaces for, people to play dominoes in the neighborhood. So other ways that those tables could be used actively in addition to just seating and eating. So that's something that we can definitely look at too.
Okay, well, we will move on to some of the next steps, but we can also, stay for additional comments. But we do want to collect feedback over the next couple of weeks and hear from folks. a lot of the concepts that we have shared tonight, some of the questions, for example, around seating and courts and which amenities you use and what's important to you in the park, those are all incorporated into surveys. The surveys are available in 4 languages, and we have them here. And in just a second, we'll be able to put the links to all of those surveys in the chat. So if you wanted to copy those and share them on social media, share them with your friends, email them around to folks you know who haven't been able to attend one of these meetings. A lot of the same questions that we've asked in this meeting and on Saturday are all in the survey, just as another way for people to provide some input. We also have a youth survey that has fewer questions and is much more visually based, and it's focused on the playground and what do children in the area want to see in the playground. It's consistent with what we'll be using with the Mason School, but it's also available online for families and kids to give their input if they're not part of the school or don't get the survey that way. So those are out. We're also going to be printing this flyer and putting this out in places around the park so that hopefully park users and community members can also see this and have an opportunity to give us their input as we move to the final design.
And also for anyone that gets the emails from me, letting them know about these meetings, I'll also be sending these links out to that listserv as well for this project. So that way you don't, like, if you want to, you can get that from there and forward the email on as well. And if there's anybody that is on this meeting tonight that isn't getting emails from me about when our next meetings are, feel free to reach out to me and I'll put my email address in the chat again as well. And I'll make sure to add you to my list for whenever I send out those updates too.
And Lauren, that was a perfect segue to our next meeting. So as Lauren had mentioned at the beginning, our third meeting, that we want to come back with a single concept that has more detail, and we'll be getting into some of those detailed discussions about not just are there tables, but what do they look like and what are the features, and thinking in more detail about the playground elements, in more detail about the fences and seating in the athletic areas, for example. And so making sure that the design, we heard you correctly, we've incorporated what's needed, and getting feedback again on some of those details and furnishings in the park as well. And so community meeting number 3 will again be offered Zoom and in person, and those are scheduled for January 17th for Zoom in the evening, and then an in-person meeting on January 20th in the morning. And like Lauren said, the information will be on the project website, and also for everybody who's getting email updates from her about the project as well.
Exactly. And I did just drop my email in the chat again as well. And also the project website I put in there too for anyone who wants to be able to go back and look at the presentation or the video from tonight in the coming days as well. And, just in terms of if anybody else has any questions, that's our last slide, but we're happy to stay on if anybody has any other thoughts or questions or comments on the designs as well. And if not, yes, hi.
Pardon, hi. My name's Sebastian Castro. I'm a writer for Boston University's Daily Free Press. I've got a twofer, if that's okay.
Sure.
I was wondering, how are recent events at Massincast going to affect, the construction, the renovation of this park?
Kathy, do you want to take that one?
We're working in partnership with our community, with the other city partners, to make sure that Clifford Park is and remains a safe place for kids in the community to recreate.
All right, thank you. And part 2 is, are you guys going to keep the safe syringe disposal kiosk in Clifford Park and Clifford Playground?
I don't think we've determined that. I think we're some of the conversations with the community, we're going to take the community's feedback to our partners at the city at PPHC and have those conversations and figure out what the right spot for those is.
All right, thank you so much.
Thank you. And thank you, everybody, for joining us tonight. And we look forward to hearing your comments in the survey. And if you think of anything else that we didn't talk about tonight that pops in your head, feel free to reach out to me. And then hopefully everyone has a great rest of December, and we'll see you guys back together in January. So thank you all for joining us this evening.
Ms. Brown, if it's all right, if I stay on for a little bit longer, just to ask a couple of questions.